Hello. Welcome back to a new video. My name is Estefania, and I know we were talking about psychological concepts in the past, and I wanted to make like some kind of switch because we were reading Roy's book about social psychology, which is pretty good, and he has more than one, so I totally recommend it. But what if we talk about social cognition, how it emerges, how we started talking about it. So I have the paperwork. So let's get it started. With the benefit of hindsight, it seems only natural that the rapid expansion of social psychology by the half of Roy after World War II would inevitably lead to soul searching about the value of the field's work. In part, this may reflect the prevailing question authority in question marks attitude of the late 1960s. Perhaps more strictly, as the growth in resources slowed, the growth of the economy in general, because after World War II, some countries were trying to emerge again, but in all the senses, all the areas of the economic, social, educational system, and others. And as the field matured from vibrant adolescence into early adulthood. This was also a period of time where a lot of ideologies, political parties, and other were created as well. So it was like time of mind shifting. Also a time of people seeing society in a different way, seeing something really big happen. That is one of the consequences. You have changes in the natural behavior in society. You have people questioning the previous social norms existing in there. And if you want to read more about social norms, I recommend you Christina Bicchieri. She has a pretty great book called Nada rápido, nada despacio. It's swimming low, swimming fast. That will be like the little, or just the basic translation. What they say. But yeah, just the literal translation about it. But I think a lot of things that we were thinking were good in the past after like a major situation, problem, political issue, and others here. Of course, lots of things are going to either both stop existing or changing. They're going to start changing. Many critics appear, of course, ranging from concerns about methodology and the ethics of experimental manipulation, especially involving deception, to more fundamental questions about the value of social psychological findings and theories. Two critics were particularly prominent. In one, Gergen in 1973 argued that social psychology should be considered an historical rather than a scientific discipline, because the principles underlying social behavior changes as a function of time and culture. Gergen's proposition, which actually also involved growing reservations about the dominance of North American white males in social psychology, led many to question the experimental methods and theoretical assumptions that were foundational at the time. As I mentioned before, some things that were also something considered as true and fundamental in the past were also changing. People were starting to second guess if that way was the good path or way to think about things and the good path to follow. The other critique, more evolutionary and ultimately more influential, that Gergen's revolutionary change was offered by William McGuire in The Yin and Yang of Progress in Social Psychology, 7 quote. That's a paper of his where he proposed that the paradigm that has recently guided experimental social psychology, testing a theory-driven hypothesis by means and laboratory manipulator experiments, an adequate new type of second guessings on the creative side. Also, this continued into more hypotheses from a system theory of social and cognitive structures that takes into account multiple bidirectional causality or casualty among social variables. Although McGuire's forecast has yet to be realized, it clearly did usher in a new generation of studies focusing on progress or process models and their basic mechanisms, as well as interest in more diverse methods. More generally, the crisis of confidence faded away in the late 1970s, as researchers redirected their energy from self-criticism to improving their research. And that is also another consequence. Most people would have been criticizing, but also this type of major events and things that happened in history led to a lot of discoveries, a lot of researches. And you know that many things that were invented during World War I and World War II are also used until today. McGuire's critique was precisely focusing and calling attention to the cognitive structures underlying social behavior. The 1970s were also like the arrival of social cognition as a dominant area of social psychological research. In large part, this movement reflected the so-called cognitive revolution, as psychology distanced itself from the anti-mentalist behaviorist tradition and instead wholeheartedly embraced the study of cognitive processes and their impact on behavior. Also remember that psychology wanted to be considered as a science really bad. And I think that was also the emerge of different disciplinary areas within the field for you to have also that into account. To be sure, there had been earlier examples of social cognition within social psychology. For example, person perception, attitude structure, and others. But the newfound legitimacy of studying cognitive processes opened the door to a different level of analysis and many new phenomena. The first of these new social cognitive phenomena was causal contribution, or causal attribution. Others like as other theoretical models as well. So don't forget about that. These were Heiders in 1978 common sense psychology in quote marks, which examine how people make ordinary judgments about causation, in particular describing the constellation of factors that fosters environmental and personal causation. Jones and Davies in 1975, with the theory of corresponding inferences, proposed that laypersons ascribe intentionally to the extent that actions deviate from what the average person would and could do. And Kelly's in 1967, collaboration model, which proposed a causal, I love saying causal, of inferences were based on comparative judgments about whether a given action was consistent over time, distinctive among related entities, and unique across persons. Attribution research prospered for a time, and although interest subsequently waned, it set the stage for much of what followed. In broad perspective, the primary contribution of the new emphasis of social cognition was to situate the major mechanisms for social psychological explanations of behavior within the mind of the individual. Contemporary social psychology thus moved away from the interpersonal and group process models favored in earlier approaches, noticing those popular in Europe and sociological social psychology. and toward more individualistic processes as logical phenomena were seen as being caused ultimately by what the individual makes the situation. Mm, you know, more so than by its distal causes, namely the situation itself. This idea was expressed influentially in Rose and Nisbet's in 1991 principle of construal. That means that causal analysis or causal analysis causal should focus on the personal and subjective meaning of the situation to the individual actor. Between 1970 and 1990, social cognition research flourished. Some of the more influential and enduring work of this area includes research on judgments and decision making, which contributed to the development of behavioral economics. Studies of social influence processes, such as research on heuristics and other strategies for organizing and using information. Early studies of automaticity also by, for example, some kind of authors in the area like Winter and Ullman, included formal theories of attitude change, such as the elaboration likelihood model, and other attitude behavior associations, such as the theory of recent action. And those others including authors such as Petty and Schiavo in 1986 and Fishbane and Axon in 1974. Various models of social categorization and schema use, including models of person memory, like the one from Ostrom in 1989. Dual process models such as those differentiating, deliberate, and implemental mindsets, and others. This is not to say that other topics were dominant. However, motivation was becoming more important in social psychology as exemplified by growing attention to self-regulation. Several major models were formulated during this period, among them Carver and Skier's control theory in 1981. Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory in 1985, and others. But let's continue, because perhaps more significant than all of these changes in content were changes in the way that research was conducted. Research ethics boards became a standard, requiring more thorough attention to the protection of research participants' welfare, raising questions about procedures such as deception and informed consent. A more substantive change involved the introduction of microprocessors, which made available sophisticated tools for conducting research and analyzing data. I don't know if you ever heard of, there are some kind of platforms when nowadays you're doing a technical research, like you're going to make a scientific article, you can have like a survey you made to different people, let's say like 25 people, you made a form or an interview, and you can actually put it on a platform, and it can give you the statistics of based on what the people responded, and then you can include that to your research results once you publish it. So those kind of major advances made like a whole difference. Some people might be encountering this during college times, some people would not. But even though after college there are still like some kind of research groups that are being held in colleges that you can even join without being like a formal institute of that school. So if you want to know more about researches, of course, watch some content, but I also recommend you to join this kind of groups because they're always like aching for more people. Believe me. Few people are actually interested, especially people that are in the academic field. They want other people to join them, to join their groups, to learn how to research, because they always need more hands. Why is that? Because there's like lots to do, because what they're studying there are some things that need to be questions to be asked, things to research. So make sure to go into your local school to see if they need some help, if to see if they have this kind of research groups, because they might need you. But let's continue. So another sample would be the technology that allow researchers to measure reaction times within milliseconds or to present stimuli at exposure lengths that could be carefully controlled to the subliminal and supraliminal. These tools afford unprecedented opportunities to ask questions. We need to ask that earlier researchers could barely imagine. That is entirely true. Yet more widespread were changes in data analysis. In 1970, most analyses were conducted using large, cumbersome, malfunction-prone manual calculators. Nearly all published studies presented very simple statistics, largely because analysis involving more than 3 variables require matrix algebra. So there was like a major issue with that, or just made everything more complicated. By 1990, sophisticated statistical software of mainframe or personal computers was something that made things from something complex to something more simplistic. And of course, measuring more than one variable, which is amazing. And we allow it until today. Journals were changing too. In April in 1980s, JPHP split into its current 3 independent sections under the single cover. Normally designed to contend with the distinct expertise that the 3 areas were perceived to require, as well as the workload created by ever-increasing submissions. The split was a sign of growing specialization and complexity. So the place where you applaud your contribution to research society, where you applaud your thesis, where you get your article published. Imagine the kind of the enormous amount of work that people needed to use in order to classify every article one by one without having these modern journals. That was like a huge amount of work. So this is also like a great contribution for this. And also other journals were founded, including the European Journal of Social Psychology and the Journal of Applied Social Psychology in 1971. In 1975, this Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin as well. All these activities suggest that although McGuire seems to have missed the mark in predicting the demise of the laboratory experiment, he was spot on about much of the rest of it, which is great. But by 1990, social psychologists were asking multivariable questions about more intricate or more complex concepts. They were using more sophisticated methods to collect and analyze their data, so they were able to ask more complex questions for sure. And their publications were growing in length, detail, and complexity, even in bidirectionality had not yet become endemic. For example, experiments with unidimensional causality continued to dominate over correlational approaches. Researchers were thinking in terms of and beginning to test mediational models. All of these signs indicated that social psychology had some process in progress along the path of becoming an established science. As I mentioned before, we, the people in psychology, we were aching so bad to be in the scientific field, to be considered as a science. And why is that? I don't know why. Because in this world, science equals to validation, equals to something you can measure and to be applied multiple times. So we needed that validation in order to be considered as a serious field. But also about being able to have funding for researchers, and also related stuff. So for example, if something is valid, that means something is worth digging into. So I will leave it right here. Probably we can talk next time about spreading about social psychology. Next time, talking about it from 1990 to today. Well, let me know what you think about so far. I'm really happy to be with you, to be again in this kind of sketches. There aren't sketches in order for you to learn more psychological concepts in a better way. So let me know your questions. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you like this kind of format or not. But I also have like long format videos of audio only for you to listen while you're cooking, also while you're working, driving, and others. And of course, like some kind of, I don't know, monologues. By some time, I just write about things that I think about, personal opinions, that become some kind of commentary that I also like to share. And those are like the black skin videos for you to also listen to while doing all this stuff. But in my opinion, I prefer those before going to sleep. But also during the mornings when I exercise, so everybody can adequate every video as you like the most. So, I'll send you kisses as always. Bye bye.